Well, if we think about clinical equipment, which you've already mentioned there, that's where we think is a really good place to start, because there are trials of various different technologies that go on out there, but they generally can't scale because they're too costly and they're too difficult to implement. So, and when I talk about implementing, if you have or haven't got the perfect Wi-Fi network, then what? Well, then we're into what we call IoT gateways. So we put sensors on things and they're going to have to talk to some other device, which is going to have to be cable run. So there's PoE or data cabling, there might be power cabling, all of the reasons why you wouldn't want to close down a ward, work out how to get cable runs through, old asbestos filled buildings, etc. So there's lots of complication, but really what we want to get down to is I need to know where my IV pumps are, the syringe drivers, I need to know where the wheelchairs, the beds, the rental equipment that I'm paying monthly for, I can't afford to lose that at any time. So lots of use cases around the assets, and one really important one is around preventive maintenance and audit and compliance, to say this has been certified, calibrated, tested, compliant to be back in use. So that's a really, really key one that we think we can confidently address today.
So in terms of use a method of tracking equipment, what is happening in the location tracking space at the moment? What's the latest technology available?
Yeah, so good question, because everyone I speak to in trusts always uses the 4 letters RFID. RFID is everything, but that's just one type of technology. So really we need to replace that with RTLS, which is the real-time location services and solutions that fit in there. And the real-time piece of this, if we do it right, allows us to automate a whole host of other things behind the scenes. So that's what we're going to show today, further down the line with the demo. But the difference here and the way that technology has moved on is now using low energy, so battery power for everything. So if we need to use a tag, and you've got one right there, which might be a good one to show up as an example of a small, lightweight ways. I don't know if you can even see it on this camera, but yeah, I mean, it's super tiny. And this is the Contact Nano tag, which could be worn on a patient wristband. It could be on a bed or an rental bed or an oxygen cylinder, something like that. And this is using Bluetooth, low energy. So the battery life in these sort of tags anywhere up to 6, 7, even longer years, because the larger tags for perhaps, an IV pump has an accelerometer in it. So it's taking advantage of that technology to turn itself on and off, so it's not constantly having to transmit. Now on the Wi-Fi tags, battery life is really poor. It takes a huge amount of energy. You're also then having to think about the Wi-Fi network itself to support Wi-Fi based tags. RFID, if they're passive, you're going to have to put gateways in. If they're active, again, it's using Wi-Fi technology to get in there. And Wi-Fi has its limitations. It's not really the perfect means for IoT. BLE is great because of the long battery life, but also when we bring in infrared into that, then we have another box of the Contact Portal B, which allows us to map a room with infrared, and infrared doesn't go through walls. So now all of a sudden, we're into the world of we can be 100% confident that a particular asset, person, or staff member is in a specific space. No longer is it 5 meter, 10, 20, 30 meter accuracy. We can say they're definitely in this room where we are today.
Yeah, so you have a mixture of room-based location tracking devices and maybe more specific wards, or let's think of a warehouse perhaps where there's equipment being stored. Yeah. You just need to know it's in that warehouse. Exactly. You've got a level of accuracy. You don't need to specifically know that it's in a particular room at a particular point in time. That's really interesting. So on the screen, we're sort of talking about location tracking of patients and clinical equipment as well. So we can see this. It's almost like a chewing gum, isn't it? I feel like eating it in a way.
Like a breakfast meeting.
Well, yeah, it is incredibly light. I think you quite easily pop that on your wristband. You wouldn't even know it was there. So you talked about safeguarding on the screen. What do we mean in terms of what are the opportunities around safeguarding, particularly around patients?
Yeah, so I guess if we take patients at risk, it could be frail, elderly, dementia patients. We need to know that they're not where they shouldn't be and they are where they should be. Equally, someone who's just had a hip replacement or a leg cast put on and they're wandering off somewhere and they decide to disconnect themselves. So lots of reasons we might want to know where a patient is or how long they're spending there, and having automatically the system to tell us someone has left that area, or perhaps a patient at risk has entered the stairwell and is disappearing off. It's, you know, and the only way we could really be able to do this properly is to have a good level of accuracy, which we can do in Bluetooth, and density, and supported by, you know, Cisco infrastructure that's ideally optimized for this. And then we add on, as you said, the room level infrared piece where we need it, perhaps in certain areas. And now we know the second someone has left, but we might set a rule to say it's fine for them to walk out for 2 minutes, but if they're not back after 3, then we need to alert a nurse or a healthcare professional to go and find them.